Dr. Wright is an orthopedic surgeon and peak performance and optimal. She's going to be talking about peak performance and optimal health from the backyard to the boardroom. Dr. Wright's a double boarded fellowship trained orthopedic surgeon and with a subspecialty certification in sports medicine. She's an internationally recognized authority on active aging and mobility, harnessing innovative technology to focus. My eyes are not good. Focus integrative patient-centered orthopedic sports surgery and wellness programming. This is going to be a great presentation, so please all help me welcome Dr. Wright.
Thank you so much, President, for having me and for the whole group, not only the people who are here, but I know a lot of you are in your home offices, so I'm thrilled to be here. And I realize that I am new to you. And actually, I'm new to Orlando. We just moved here about 18 months ago, but I am not new to Rotary. In fact, I was raised on a farm in Fredonia, Kansas. And if you've ever been there, I probably will give you a prize. But 2,000 people live in Fredonia, Kansas, where we inherited the family farm. And my father, who was first a principal of schools until he decided to stop having to discipline other people's children, then became the owner of a land title company called Kansas Title Service, because he's a historian at heart, so an entrepreneur like many of you. But most significantly for my career in Rotary is that you were the group that gave me my first medical scholarship in 1986. I know, so long ago. I mean, some people in the room were not even born then. However, we were all born then. And I'm thankful, just like you're thankful, right? It was an encouragement, right? That other people saw in me a future and capacity to serve other people. So thank you, Rotarians from afar, for that. So we are thrilled to be here in Central Florida. And I have landed in Lake Nona, and I'll tell you a little bit why that is, with the Houston Clinic. And so for 4 minutes, maybe, I'm going to speed through what we do here. I know the Rotary is all about networking businesses and building relationships. So we'll start with that. Whoops, if I can get this right. So, you know, I am an orthopedic surgeon, and you may never have met a woman orthopedic surgeon before, because only 6% of us are women. And when I started orthopedic surgery in 1999, there were only 3%. So really, we've done a good job, but we've only doubled, and there's only 6%. So if I'm the first female orthopedic surgeon you've ever met, that's okay, because we're few and far between. But this is a bio slide, basically, of what I do. I am a sports surgeon. I do shoulder, hip, and knee arthroscopy. Because I'm a sports surgeon, I've always been a team doc. There's a difference between a surgeon who just stays in the OR and does the surgery and the one that goes and stands on the field. So I've been really privileged, if I can stop stimulating this thing, to take care of the University of Pittsburgh football team as their head doctor for many years, Georgia State, the Pittsburgh Penguins. But I'm also a researcher, because as an academic surgeon, it's not enough just to do what I learned in my fellowship. But like you, because I understand you're a Q&A marvelous group, I have a curious mind, and I always not only wanted to know more, but I wanted to be the first to know. So I've always done research. But here's the why, right? If any of you have read Simon Sinek, you have to know your why you're here. So my why for using these farm-raised hands to put metal in people or make people walk again is that I know that by making people walk again, or giving you back shoulder function, or getting you out of pain, that I am not only saving your mobility, but in doing so, saving you from the ravages of chronic disease, because there are 34 chronic diseases that I'll highlight today that we all die from. But there is one pill that takes care of them all, and that is mobility. So if I, as an orthopedic surgeon, have the privilege to be the gatekeeper of mobility and give you back your legs or your arms or your painless life, that is a reason to show up every morning and do the work. So that is my why. But the sine qua non of my career has been as a builder. Many of you are business owners or business runners. I've always called myself an intrapreneur until right this moment, right in moving to Florida. So what I mean by that is at the University of Pittsburgh, where I was for 20 years, I built big businesses inside of that big business, right? So I was the medical director, the inaugural medical director of the UPMC Lemieux Sports Complex. We're in a hockey playoff season right now, so it's an apropos reference. 186,000 feet of sports goodness. We skated the hockey team there. We skated 800 kids and took care of Pittsburghians, if that's how you say it. And I was brought to Lake Nona to help the Houston Clinic, which I'll introduce to you, expand their business here. And we're doing it out of the Lake Nona Performance Club, and I'll tell you why we're doing that. So Houston Orthopedics is a 75-year-old legacy orthopedic group started in Columbus, Georgia. They've now expanded into 4 states. We have about 15 surgeons here in Central Florida, both trauma and elective. And we're also in Alabama and Tennessee and lots of places in Georgia. And in Lake Nona, we take care of the beautiful Lake Nona children. These are actually kids that work out in the performance club, and all the people like you and me who want to stay active across their lifespan. These are not professional athletes, although looking how fit they are, you might think they are, but they are simply people who demand of themselves peak performance and invest in their mobility every day as a tool to get there. Oh, I should have warned you. I am an actual surgeon. When I talk about peak performance and subjects outside of the OR, people always come up and ask me, but do you still do surgery? So if you don't like to look at this kind of stuff, look away right now. So these are, yes, I am a surgeon. I do all kinds of things I was trained to do more than 20 years ago. But I'm also an innovator, remember? So I have brought to Central Florida this nanotechnology where we now do surgery in the knee, shoulder, and I'm developing it for the hip without incisions. And you can be awake. So I'm going to step away from this mic, but this is the actual scope. It's smaller than the end of a pen. And I do not make incisions. We use little points of entry. And people can be awake because it feels like not much. And the recovery is amazing. And you know why I became interested in this? It's because we have an opioid epidemic in this country, and any technique I can use so that my patients do not have to take opioids, it is worth going down that road. And this is exactly one of them. The other thing I do is try to avoid surgery altogether. It's weird to hear a surgeon say that, but I had a stem cell lab for 20 years at the University of Pittsburgh. So I have always believed that our bodies are capable of healing ourselves. So we do that here in Lake Nona using your own blood and bone marrow to avoid surgery altogether. So, and our practice is very integrated. If you are in the center of our universe, because of where we've put our practice in the Lake Nona Performance Club, I can give you all these resources. If you need a nutritionist, I'm sending you, right? If you need therapy, I'm sending you, because my philosophy of care is to take care of you as a whole person, not just a shoulder, not just a knee, but a whole person, and it makes a difference. But today I'm going to talk to you about peak performance. Now, I am a sports surgeon, as we talked about, and I have had the incredible privilege my entire career of taking care of people who seek to be their best selves, whether they're professional athletes, executives like yourself, other surgeons. We're peak performers and we have high capacity, always trying to be the best that we can be. So I've learned a lot over the years. I'm very curious, and I ask leaders like you, what is peak performance to you? How have you gotten here? How do you bring people up with you? And so I want to share some of that with you today. Now, I also purposely moved to Lake Nona. This is an old picture of Lake Nona, where there were many more cow pastures than there currently are, although there are still cow pastures out there. But I moved to Lake Nona because 10 years ago, I began being invited to the Lake Nona Impact Forum, where every year there's an invited group of about 350 medical leaders imagining the future of healthcare. And so I knew what was happening in Central Florida in terms of innovation and medicine and sports. So I moved to this place of peak performers because we can envision the future and then make it happen. And I wanted to be surrounded by people like you who foresee the future and make it happen. But I wanted to teach you what I've learned from other peak performers. So I had the privilege of leading this distinguished group, and I'll tell you who these people are, and asking them, what is peak performance to you? And how do you bring your people up alongside you? So when I asked Russell Wilson, who's a MVP quarterback in the NFL, what is peak performance to you? He said to me, peak performance to me, and you can think about what it means to you. Peak performance to him was in the midst of chaos. He can be precise. He can think clearly. And actually, in the midst of chaos, when you need the most peak performance for him, time slows down. And he may be backpedaling in the pocket. He may be back there wondering, he's a right-handed quarterback, wondering if his blindside tackle and guard are going to be there for him, right? But in that moment, when he's backpedaling and it's chaos and he sees the people coming for him, it's like everything is in slow motion, because for peak performers, that's what happens in our brain. And I'm sure there's times in your business where it was chaos, but everything slowed down and everything became in much clearer focus. So that's Russell Wilson's view of what peak performance is. I then asked Deepak Chopra, who's a cardiologist by training, but one of the world's authorities on meditation and Ayurvedic medicine. And I said, Dr. Chopra, what is peak performance to you? And not surprisingly, his definition was different. It was not slowing down. It was peak performance to him is when you are totally present in the moment. You can't see the distractions. You are quiet. You're noticing everything. And then finally, I asked Hugh Hurd, a world-class alpine climber. And his story is that he was climbing and got caught in an avalanche. And when he woke up in the hospital, he had, because of frostbite, both of his legs amputated above the knee. And so his response to that, when he woke up and noticed, was not to panic, because he's a peak performer. He assessed the situation. This is his own story. He looked down and said, I guess I lost some body parts. And then his perspective was, he went back to his lab trying to think how he's going to solve this problem. Now, he is a robotics professor at MIT. So what he did was he invented himself some new legs that were not just stiff, but they were robotic. And the first time he wore them, he decided, let's see if people are going to notice, because he could make himself grow. So every day for 2 weeks, he increased his height 1/4 of an inch. And it took people almost a month to figure out that he was growing, right? So for him, his definition of peak performance is a mindset of hope that he has the capacity to make things happen that he cannot see. I have no body parts. I'm going to make something happen, right? I learned so much from talking to peak performers like this. And, you know, even as a surgeon, I'm a peak performer with high capacity and with different goals than an MVP football player or an MIT scientist. But for me, when I am in peak performance, if you've ever had surgery, I don't know if you remember it, as we wheel you in, sometimes you have some medication on board that you don't remember it. But initially, there's a lot going on. There's 5 or 6 staff members, anesthesia's working on you. And even during surgery, sometimes there's music playing and we're talking about things, but I'm going to tell you for sure, in the critical portions of the case, when my patient demands that I be in peak performance, when I am there, for me, a lot like Russell Wilson, time slows down. But a lot like MIT professor Hugh Hurd, I can see in my brain what the future needs to be for my patient and make it happen, right? So peak performers have the capacity to see the future, to solve problems, to stay in the moment, and to not panic in chaos. And then finally, I was going out the door today and I I said to my husband, hey, Pete, I'm going to go talk to the Rotary Club. What is your view of peak performance? Now, my husband is a two-time Stanley Cup champion. We're in hockey season, and he was the first captain of the Tampa Bay Lightning. So we're big into this season, and Florida won last night, right? So they're in it. If Tampa doesn't win tonight, they're out. So we're really hoping. And I said, Pete, what is peak performance to you? And he said, Vaughn, peak performance, because I told him, he knows the other guys that I've told you about. He says, Vaughn, peak performance is when, even in the dog days of hockey are those 82 games that you got to slog through to get to now, right? Even in the dog days, you demand every moment be excellent, so that when you really need to draw on peak performance, it's a habit, it's a ritual, you're not making it up. Oh, when we summarize this, what is peak performance from all these people? Here's the definition I've put together. Complete connection to your body, your brain, your mind, bliss, in the moment, to make sense out of chaos and have the faith to believe, the hope to believe, and see something that does not exist. So what I'm going to talk about today is just a few things of what I've learned from these people that you can then take back or think within yourself. Is this how I've performed as a peak performer? Or how do I bring my people up with me? Then I'm going to really get granular, because part of what makes you a peak performer is staying physically and mentally resilient and fit. So people always want to know, give me the tips, tell me how I should do that. So I'm going to do that. And then we'll wind up. So in my mind, what are the characteristics of peak performers? Number one, passion. To be a peak performer, you've got to love what you do. You cannot show up day to day to make the donuts and hate making donuts and expect to be a peak performer. You can do your best job every day, but to have the passion to rise above and be high capacity, you've got to love what you do. And I'm going to contend to you that if you do not get to a place where you love something about what you're doing so much, hop off and find that thing, so that every day can be inspiring, not only to the people you serve, but to yourself. Number two, it takes practice, and we're going to talk about that. And number three, personal authenticity. Here's the truth. Every day, I'm not a Pollyanna. Every day is not easy. Sometimes we get deep into the dog days, and that's why having this structure around peak performance and knowing why you're showing up to make the donuts. So when I say be passionate about what you do or jump off, here's some of the reasons why, or some of the questions we can ask. Who do you want to be in your career, in your family life, in your relationship life, with friends like you have today? How do you make your emotions into excellent? How do you show up and actually not just be transactional, but make everything excellent? How do you optimize your emotions to make them peak performance and easy? Remember, peak performance is not novel, it's a routine. And then as leaders, how do you pull your team up with you? So again, characters of peak performers: personal authenticity, passion, and practice. So we're going to start with authenticity. We talked about passion for a minute. What does authenticity mean? That we're going back to the question of who am I and how do I get what I want? Figuring out what I really want, right? Did I become a doctor because I was a smart kid in Fredonia, Kansas, and that's what smart kids do? Well, I'm old enough that that's kind of the answer, right? If you're a smart kid, you do one or two things, right? But had I not had the authentic passion to care for people, even in the dog days, which is 3 a.m. in the morning when you're the only resident up in the middle of the night and you've only had cold pizza and you haven't slept for 3 days, if I did not love it, then I would not have been authentic, and I should hop off and do something where I could serve better, right? Authenticity is also making the hard choices mid-career. Maybe some of you are mid-career, or you have people employed by you mid-career. Oh, I took a 6-month sabbatical between leaving the job I had in Atlanta, which was to build an orthopedic surgery department, and coming here to Central Florida to build yet another orthopedic department. It was authentic for me to realize that I needed to really evaluate what I wanted to do, who I wanted to serve, the kind of people I wanted to be around. And if it takes a 6-month sabbatical after a nearly 30-year career, then that is authentically sometimes what we have to do. And that's what I did. So that is the example of authenticity. Peak performers are honest enough with themselves to recognize where they are and make the hard decisions, right? We've already talked about passion. And now we're going to talk about practice. Practice. Here's the 3 P's of, this is so you can remember, right? The 3 P's of how you practice as a peak performer. Prepare your perspective, right? Russell Wilson's perspective is different when he's the MVP quarterback versus when he threw 2 interceptions in one of his Super Bowls, and he's standing there in the pocket again, right? So when he tells the story about perspective during hard times, he could have stood there having thrown 2 interceptions, thinking to himself, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. I used to be such a good QB. What's going to happen? Am I going to get sacked again? Or he could have looked to the future and said, oh, will I ever be good again? But no, Russell Wilson perspective is to stay quiet in the chaos, let the time slow down, and realize that the past does not predict the future. It does not have to predicate now, and that the future is its own future, right? So he just stays right in the moment. Words matter when you are having a perspective on being a peak performer. And I learned that from Russell Wilson. We have to be now. We have to keep our mind neutral, right? So how do you prepare for pressure? This is the biggest part of this talk, so we're going to spend here a moment. You, as executives, work 23% more than the staff that you manage. You sleep 24% less and probably don't get 8 hours a day, which now we know is really critical for all of our health. But here's the deal. Across the country, I'm looking in this room and I don't think it's true, but across the country, 73% of all executives are unhealthy and 40% cross the line of obesity, diminishing your impact on your business, because you cannot be the peakest performer unless you have physical health. And that is something we ignore. You know, the first time I thought about this in depth was, I think it was, 2004, when I got this call from the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And I'm thinking to myself, why is the government calling me? Well, they were calling me because I talked about optimizing health, peak performance, and precision longevity even then. And they said to me, we need you to come talk at the Army War College, because the Army War College is where the colonels and the generals from the military go for their training, for their professional development. And what they saw is that their peakest performers were dying in their mid-50s because of the stress and hardship placed upon them by leading our military. And they recognized that they had to be interested in not only professional development from a business standpoint, but from a total person standpoint, total health, physical health, mental health. Because here's the deal. Ask yourself if you've thought about this. I thought about this. Yes, indeed. I trained before the work hour restrictions, right? Now young doctors can only work 80 hours a week, which sounds absurd, right? 80 hours a week. There was no work hour restrictions when I trained. So I know that, you know, you can stay alive for 136 waking hours a week when there's only about 168. But so, and I did that all the way through my youth. And you probably worked that hard in whatever your profession is as you were training to come up. So I don't know how you felt, but when I reached middle age, I stepped back and I thought, oh my God, I have sacrificed my youth on the altar of success, and now that I have time to breathe, will my health last? What have I done to invest in my health? So I'm a doer, as you probably have caught on. And so I wanted to learn more. I wanted to do more. So during COVID, when Northside Hospital would not let the surgeons operate and I shut down our offices for 6 weeks, I became a student of resilient hardiness and grit, and actually based on the science of Dr. Paul Bartone, became certified to teach surgeons about resilience and grit and how to build more. And here's the good thing: you can build hardiness like a muscle. His research shows that there are 10 hardiness factors, which I wish we had time today, or you're welcome to come to one of our retreats and we'll go over this. But hardy people confront fears. They are realistic optimists. They have social support, role models, moral compasses, religious and spiritual practices, accept the unchangeable, take responsibility for their feelings, stand on a platform of personal growth, which is a curious mind, but hardy people all invest in their physical fitness and mental wellness. Even his research was done on prisoners of war from the Vietnam War. Even when you're in a cage, if you can do push-ups and sit-ups, you are taking control of your physical resilience, which builds your mental resilience and gives you agency to control what you can control, right? Interesting. So that's why all of this fits within being an orthopedic surgeon, because I am the gatekeeper of mobility. Remember, it's my job to help you keep moving. Because what happens if we don't? I want you to remember this slide above any other slide, is that there's a difference in this country between our health span and our life expectancy. At the turn of the 19th century, life expectancy was about 40 years old. Our life expectancy now for men is 79. Well, that was for men. At that time, no data was kept on women, so I don't know how women aged, but now the life expectancy for a man is 79-ish, a woman is 81, but here's the truth. Our health span, the years when we are healthy without the ravages of chronic disease rearing their heads and making you go to the doctor 3 times a week, is only 63 years old. So let's ask ourselves, what are we going to do to make our health span match our lifespan so that we don't spend 20 years dying and having to go to the doctor's office 3 days a week? Well, I'm the gatekeeper of mobility, and so I am going to make every one of you mobile, right? And all your other doctors are going to do it their way, or your fitness people. But because of this tool, because I don't know how you want to expire, but I want to do, we have an amazing example now. I want to do it like Queen Elizabeth. On Tuesday, she met with the Prime Minister. On Thursday, she just went to bed and didn't wake up at 97. That's how I want to do it. And so if I'm going to help you equalize your health span and your life expectancy, then we have to take action to do it. So yes, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. Yes, I do surgery, but I'm critically interested in the 5 pillars of your health. And so every person that I take care of, in fact, this morning I was taking care of people. We talk about some of these things, and I'm going to go over a couple of them with you because we're probably running out of time. If you do one thing, if you have no time and you do one thing to invest in your resilience and your mobility, I want you to build lean muscle mass, whatever it takes, because building lean muscle mass is not only a longevity factor, but it affects all these other systems in your body, even your mental health through doing this. Listen, can I touch your gavel? Even doing this. I know, really, I shouldn't have said it this way. The contraction of skeletal muscle causes the transcription of a protein called galanin that travels to your brain and builds resilience. This is mental health care right here, right? So if you can only have time to do one thing, learn how to lift weights. And I'm going to give you very specifically how I advise my patients to do it. Here you go. I want you to put down the mamby-pamby pink weights that you lift 60 times in a day. There is no role for that in building lean muscle mass. If any of you ever did that, I want you to lift as heavy as is safe for you. So my heavy is very different from a bodybuilder's heavy, but heavy is defined as what you can lift for 3 to 6 reps, 4 sets. That's it. Do not lift a mamby-pamby little weight 4 sets of 15 because it will not stimulate your stem cell replication. You want your muscle stem cells, called satellite cells, not to be hanging around quiescent. You want them rebuilding and replicating. That's what this will do for you. It will stimulate your nerves to fire more muscles together. It will increase your metabolic rate. It will burn more fat. And who doesn't want less fat, more muscle? And finally, it will increase your posture and your stability. You know what it's also going to do? It's going to keep you from being one of the people that come to my emergency room. I take a lot of call that have tripped over a seam in the carpet in the airport, because my office is about 10 minutes from the airport, and broken a hip. When we fall and break our hips, 50% of the time, we do not return to pre-fall function, and a third of us die. So if I can stay strong enough and powerful enough by something as simple as lifting weights and change my whole metabolism, it's worth the investment in our time. Peak performers do it. You're peak performers. Number 2, if you're able, I want you to do plyometrics and jump. Did you know jumping 20 times a day, just like this, it's not complicated, will stimulate your bone density and help build better bone. So it's not crazy complicated. Lift heavy, jump up and down. The other thing I want you to do is examine if you are or were, like I was, addicted to high intensity interval training. Like I love HIIT training. I love getting my heart rate up to 186 because it gives me the hugest dose of dopamine in my brain you've ever seen. But what it does, I now see the fault in my ways, but lots of my patients are still doing all the branded things. I'm going to name the brands, all the branded CrossFit and Orange Theory and even Peloton. And I love that stuff. I was addicted to that stuff. 6 days a week is too much. It's like a merry-go-round. You're releasing too much stress hormone. You are overtrained. You're going to hurt yourself, which makes you're going to have to come to an orthopedic surgeon's office. You're going to have to take time off. Your brain's going to hate to be away from dopamine. And it's not how professional athletes train. If you want to be a peak performer, this is really a ground zero between lifting weights, jumping. I want you to do what we call zone 2 training, which is low heart rate training. My zone 2, my maximum is 186. My zone 2 is 125. So you don't get hurt. You're burning more fat. It's great for your metabolism. And I could talk to you for hours about these things, obviously, but I'm hoping to change the way you address your mobility because it's important and it's not complicated. And, it's really based off your lactate threshold. So if you're really interested on how to optimize your mobility so that you're not wasting time doing things that are hurting you, then come. We'll measure your lactate threshold. And then finally, sprints are amazing. After your zone 2 workout twice a week, just 2 little sprints, 30 seconds, are really good for our insulin sensitivity, preventing diabetes and building up our energy stores. The final things, we talked about mobility, lifting heavy, all of this prep to practice peak performance, right? There's a purpose in this. The last thing I'm going to talk to you about is what you're eating and how you're eating it. If there's one thing I want you to do is stop eating or adding refined sugar to everything. Sugar is a huge inflammatory. It inflames us. It makes you more in pain. And I'm not saying not to eat carbs. I'm asking you to focus on green leafy, lean protein, and to eat your food in a certain order. It sounds crazy, but it's very well documented. And I'm going to teach you how to do this today. By doing what I'm about to teach you, you have tons of short-term benefits that you can read. immense long-term benefits, including helping to care and prevent all the diseases that are killing us by preventing the huge sugar spikes that we get when we eat naked carbs, or the 16 pounds of sugar that industry adds to our food. So how do you do it? Oh, and it's possible and easy. You may have noticed this thing I wear. I am not a diabetic, but I'm addicted to my data. And this is a continuous glucose monitor. So by doing what I'm about to teach you, ordering the order of your food, this is my glucose curve. Notice how flat this is, right? There's no huge spikes. And I ate all day, basically, protein and green leafy. But also notice the height of this. The definition of prediabetes, which is a precursor of Alzheimer's, is 100, right? By eating in the way I'm about to teach you, I keep my baseline glucose in the 80s, which is really metabolically healthy, and it's not hard. Listen to what I'm about to show you to do. This is all you have to do. I'm not asking you to eat differently. I'm asking you to change the order of how you eat. Eat your green leafy vegetables and your fiber first. That will go to the bottom of your stomach and form a net, because it's really hard to digest. That's why cows have 4 stomachs. Farm Girl is telling you cows have 4 stomachs because it's hard to digest this stuff, right? Number 2, you layer on that your protein, which I believe everyone should have at least a gram of protein per lean pound, more if you're working out a lot. This is a minimum. So 120, 130, 140 grams, depending on how much you weigh. Finally, after you've put the veggies, after you've put the protein and fat, put your carbs on top, but choose fibrous carbs, whole grains, not simple added sugar. This is so simple, but this has profoundly changed my glucose curve and my energy levels, right? I no longer have a 3 o'clock drought. So this is a new age of medicine, and I've given you really specific but generic things to do. You deserve your own plan. And so the little cards you have on your table is how we deliver this to our executives and our patients. And if you're interested in that, just pull me aside. We consider your molecular aging, your precision lifestyle factors, and we work with resilience and your mindset. So finally, we talked about your perspective, preparing for pressure, and then you have to prepare your people, because you may be an expert at being a peak performer, but how do you bring the people up with you? And so I talked again to Peter Taglianetti, my husband, about this. How do peak performers do this? And he said, Vaughn, it's like a Christmas tree. As the peak performer rises, and if they do it right, and they're not just selfish and concerned with themselves, they will bring all the layers of the people that they work with behind them, so that everyone rises as the tide rises of performance. So I am done. I come to you from a place that is aspirational, full of peak performers, Lake Nona, where we believe in hopefulness and things we cannot envision, because we envision the future. And I hope that today, that some of the things I've said about peak performance, being prepared, preparing your people, you can apply to your own work. But please do not forget that part of that is physical and mental resilience. So thank you for your time today.
Dr. Wright, I have one question, but I wanted to tell you, when you woke me up, when you said you attended the Army War College, I too went there as one of the few civilians in the country that got invited to Carlisle Barracks. Wonderful experience.
Wasn't it amazing?
And being from Valdosta, Georgia, I know the Houston Clinic because all the Auburn, Georgia
Yes.
Tech guys go to Columbus, Georgia to have the
Houston
orthopedic
Clinic.
work.
Yes.
My
thank you.
question is, 2.5 years ago, I went to see an orthopedic surgeon noted here in Orlando. Said, Thomas, you've got bone on bone, your knee, we're gonna do 2 knees. But my walking partner, a cardiologist, said, get a second opinion. I did.
Mhm.
And this doctor said, just like you said, your talk, we want to do all we can to prevent surgery.
Yeah.
So he injected a new FDA approved lubricant, EUFLEXXA, sodium
Euflexa.
hydrogenate.
Yeah,
And he did it in both knees over
Mhm.
5 weeks.
That's right.
Not trying to do surgery to prevent it because it's a lubricant. And on my mother's grave, I'll testify to anybody in this room, it saved me a knee. What do you think of
Of
the lubricant?
Euflexa?
And what do you think using that for people in lieu of having knee surgery if it works?
Well, I love that. I love that question because anybody who comes to me with arthritis, I talk to them about the spectrum of care. And you will hear me talk to you about anti-inflammatory foods and all the things along the way, with surgery being the last thing. Now, I do knee replacement, but here's what I demand of my patients: that you walk out of the hospital the same day, that you are in this like a team sport. So to get people there, one of the things we use is what you got, which is called hyaluronic acid. Hyaluronic acid is a very high viscosity substance that your body uses and makes to lubricate your own knees. So in healthy knees, cartilage cells are fat and happy. They're just big and round. But as we get arthritis, they begin to desiccate. So hyaluronic acid is the same structure your body makes, made by recombinant DNA technology in laboratories, because we can't harvest it from people. So, and we inject it into the knee and it lubricates, it stimulates the lining of the knee to pay attention to the cartilage again. And I'm going to tell you, I too have years of patients who have tried these non-operative ways to stay mobile and have avoided knee replacement. But then when they need it, we heal them with steel and give them their lives back. Yes.
I've got 2 artificial knees. They work great.
Yeah.
But and a great presentation on lifestyle and everything. But unfortunately, I've got 2 very specific questions.
Okay.
Do you have someone on staff that does total wrist replacement and secondary and more common reverse shoulder replacement?
Yes. So at this time, so we have 5 elective doctors in Central Florida and 9 trauma doctors. So partners of mine do reverse total shoulders. I do not. And one of my partners does wrist surgery, because the way orthopedics works is there's 7 subspecialties and we all do fellowships in our subspecialties. So hand has its own CAQ subspecialty, but we do have partners that do it. Yes.
Doctor, thanks so much for your presentation.
you.
We're so delighted you're here.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got a little credit for you there.
Thank you so much. Thank
Okay.
you.
Let's hear it again for Dr. Wright.